Good morning and welcome to everybody. This hearing will get underway. Last night, President Trump called for a renewal of our nation's infrastructure. Today, we're going to hear from leaders representing the infrastructure needs of our geographically diverse country, from Miami Beach to Utah, and even from my home state of South Dakota, Governor Dennis Dugard. So I want to thank you all for being here today. Though separated by thousands of miles, our communities are connected by a vital network of transportation and communications infrastructure. Providing this connection for people, goods, and information to travel safely and efficiently across America is a responsibility shared by all levels of government, as evidenced by our panel today. Most recently, through the work of this committee and others, Congress reauthorized federal surface transportation programs in the Fixing America's Surface Transportation, or FAST Act, the $305 billion five-year bill enacted to improve our nation's infrastructure, increase safety, and enhance economic growth. The first long-term transportation bill in a decade, the FAST Act provided needed certainty and was a big step in the right direction. But our nation's infrastructure is too important to American competitiveness not to remain a critical focus of this committee. For example, without a robust and efficient transportation sector, rural states like mine would be unable to get their goods to market. In 2015, South Dakota alone saw $65 billion in freight flows traveling to and from the state. The majority of that freight volume is made up of agricultural products which help to feed Americans in places like Miami, in Salt Lake City, and countless places in between. Commerce does not end at our state lines or even our national borders. In fact, in a recent letter to President Trump, over 200 agricultural producers and related businesses highlighted this point, stating, and I quote, "Infrastructure that supports rural communities and links them to global markets has helped make the U.S. the unquestioned leader in agriculture production," end quote. More broadly, a more efficient transportation network boosts the competitiveness of nearly every sector of our economy. Unfortunately, what used to be the best transportation infrastructure system in the world is now falling behind, unable to keep pace with the growing demands of our economy. Similarly, while the U.S. is a global leader in broadband innovation and investment, millions of Americans still do not have access to the Internet, most of them in rural communities. Our digital networks have primarily been built by companies using private capital, $1.5 trillion of private sector investment over the last 20 years. Yet in many parts of our country, it is simply not economical to build broadband systems, leaving some communities behind. The federal government and many states have stepped in to address this funding gap, augmenting private capital with limited but crucial government support. To continue bridging this digital divide, we need to examine existing programs to determine how best to improve their efficacy. And we need to explore new ways to reduce the cost of broadband, like reducing regulatory obstacles to deployment. For example, the Mobile Now Act, which Ranking Member Nelson and I introduced and this committee approved earlier this year, would make broadband deployment more affordable by streamlining the red tape broadband providers face and by helping to make more wireless spectrum available for mobile broadband services. Enacting this legislation would be a great down payment toward ensuring that all Americans can benefit from the digital economy. Fortunately, improving our infrastructure for transportation and information is an area where bipartisan agreement and cooperation among different levels of government can oftentimes be found. Of course, as we work to achieve our shared goals, we need to ensure that we are fully exploring funding options and being responsible stewards of federal funds. And transportation is reaffirmed with the passage of the FAST Act. States and local governments receive an allocated share of federal funding through formulas. This funding model has been widely considered appropriate and equitable for the states, as evidenced by the Senate's strong vote of 83-16. Outside of the direct funding model, infrastructure investment takes a variety of forms. Some of the more recently discussed, yet not necessarily new, approaches include bonds, tax credits, and credit assistance programs. Compared to rural areas, high population density urban areas may be conducive to a more diverse range of financing options, including public-private partnerships, or so-called P3s. In some cases, P3s can enhance capital efficiency by transferring greater responsibility to private entities in exchange for access to some sort of revenue, such as tolls, fees, or availability payments. Despite ongoing interest, however, P3s currently account for only a small share of highway projects, partly because many projects do not make financial sense for private sector investment. Even with these limitations, in an era of scarce dollars, such financing tools should be considered a valuable supplement, but not a substitute for traditional infrastructure investment. We should be focused on what works for different areas of the country, not locked into a particular approach. This includes supporting existing authorized programs that work. And that is not to say that the existing federal funding system can't be improved or to suggest that more funding is always the answer. In some instances, transportation providers and shippers have been saddled with unnecessary regulations and paperwork requirements that burden operations and inhibit capital investment. In other cases, a web of permitting processes unnecessarily slows project delivery and adds cost to project construction. Eliminating unnecessary hurdles while maintaining an emphasis on safety improvements can lead to a better use of both public and private dollars. I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. I look forward to hearing your testimony, and I'm going to turn now to our ranking member, Senator Nelson, for his opening.